In 1806, Napoleon Bonaparte was the most powerful man in Europe, Emperor of the French, victor at Austerlitz, seemingly unstoppable. Yet, on the far side of the world, at the tip of Africa, his empire suffered a quiet but decisive defeat. While Napoleon fought in Egypt, he never set foot in southern Africa. The closest he came was the lonely rock of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he died a prisoner of the British in 1821. But in 1806, his shadow stretched all the way to the Cape of Good Hope, one of the most strategic harbours in the world, the gateway to India. If Napoleon's France controlled this coast, Britain's empire in the east was in danger. So, in the shadow of his empire, the battle for South Africa began. It lasted just a few hours, but it would shape the next 100 years of southern African history. Welcome back to the channel. If you want to help me uncover more of these dusty lost history files, I've just launched a Buy Me a Coffee page. Every coffee helps fuel the research and keeps these stories alive. The link's in the description. Thank you so much. As we saw in last week's video, Britain wasn't new to the Cape. Back in 1795, during the chaos of the French Revolutionary Wars, British troops captured the colony, aided by the Q letters from the exiled Dutch leader William V, Prince of Orange. Earlier that same year, France had invaded the Netherlands and set up the Batavian Republic. The name was meant to connect the Dutch with the ancient Batavi tribe, symbols of freedom and resistance. Then came the 1802 Treaty of Amiens, and for a brief moment, peace seemed possible. The Cape was handed back by the British to the Dutch. Not the old Dutch Republic, but the Batavian Republic. Europe seemed to be catching its breath, but not for long. By 1803, Britain and France were at war again. With Napoleon leading an expansionist France, the Cape Colony's strategic position put it squarely in Britain's sights. Then, in 1805, Nelson's crushing victory at Trafalgar broke Napoleon's naval power. Suddenly, Britain could move against the Cape again, knowing France couldn't easily challenge its fleet or support its allies in the region. This time, Britain wasn't there to hold the Cape for a moment. They came with a bigger force, a clear mission, and a plan to keep it for good. In this episode, we're diving into 1806, the British landing, the fierce battle at Blaauwberg, and the quick campaign that secured the Cape for 100 years. But first, what was life like at the Cape under the Batavians? In short, complicated. When the colony changed hands in 1803 from Britain to the Batavian Republic, it didn't just get a new flag, it got a whole new playbook. The Batavians, closely tied to Napoleonic France, scrapped the Dutch East India Company's old trade monopolies and put the colony under direct state control. Their goal? A stronger, more centralised government. Leading the charge was Commissioner General Jacob Abraham de Mist. His vision was ambitious, professionalising the civil service, reforming the courts and tackling corruption. He even pushed for religious tolerance and education reform. But many settlers clung to old traditions and resisted these changes. It was a moment full of possibility, but also tension. A brief calm before the storm that was about to hit in 1806. The fragile peace from the Treaty of Amiens broke apart in 1803, dragging Britain back into war with France, now led by the seemingly unstoppable Napoleon. For Britain, Batavian control of the Cape was a huge red flag. If the Cape fell under French influence, a key route for imperial trade could be cut off. The Batavians themselves weren't openly hostile, but their close ties to France made London nervous. The Cape was a vital stop on the way to India, and Britain feared it could become a French naval base threatening their empire. By handing the Cape back to the Batavians, Britain had basically given a strategic foothold to a French ally. Napoleon's ambitions and deep mistrust on both sides meant real peace was out of reach. To Britain, the Cape was a crucial piece on a massive global chessboard. The Royal Navy's power depended on secure coaling stations, safe harbours, and reliable supply lines. Losing the Cape to a French ally wasn't just a local problem, it threatened the entire Eastern Empire. Unlike in 1795, when British occupation was seen as temporary, by 1805 the game had changed. This time Britain wasn't leaving. The goal was permanent control, a forward base in the global fight for empire. By July 1805, with Napoleon planning to send French warships to reinforce the Batavians, the decision was made. The Cape would be taken back, and this time it would stay British. The operation was led by two big personalities, General Sir David Baird and Admiral Sir Home Riggs Popham. Baird was a seasoned commander with experience in both India and Europe, known for his discipline and calm under pressure. He was the steady hand Britain needed for this tough campaign. His resilience was legendary. He even survived captivity during the brutal Second Mysore War in India. On the naval side, Admiral Popham led the Royal Navy squadron. Bold and innovative, Popham had a reputation as a bit of a maverick. Earlier that year, he had led a controversial expedition to South America, so the Cape Campaign was his chance to prove himself and regain favour with the Admiralty. In early August, 64 ships set sail from Cork, Ireland, carrying a powerful British fleet. After months at sea, on January 4th, 1806, they anchored off Los Pierres Bay, just short of Cape Town, near what we now call Melkbos-Strand. This landing was chosen with care, offering a way to come ashore without immediate conflict, and set the stage for a march south towards the capital. Over the 6th and 7th of January, around 6,500 British troops landed at Los Pierres Bay. The corps infantry included the battle-hardened 24th, 59th and 83rd Regiments of Foot, veterans of campaigns across the British Empire. Supporting them were the 93rd Regiment, known as the Sutherland Highlanders. These Highlanders would later earn fame at the Battle of Blaauwberg in 1854, forming the legendary Thin Red Line. Artillery came from the Royal Artillery, and the 20th Light Dragoons provided cavalry support, though the rough terrain limited their role in battle. Together, these well-trained regiments formed a force more than capable of facing the outnumbered Batavian defenders. Opposing the British was General Jan Willem Janssens, commander of the Batavian forces, and the colony's newly appointed governor. Loyal and experienced, Janssens faced a daunting task. His force numbered fewer than 2,000 troops, made up of a mix: the 22nd Battalion, the 5th Waldeckers, the Hottentot Brigade, some French Marines, the 9th Jaegers, Waldeck Jaegers, Javanese Artillery, Mounted Artillery and the Burger Cavalry. Reinforcements from Europe were scarce, so Janssens had to rely on clever tactics and local support to slow the British advance. Many of his troops were poorly equipped, and discipline varied widely. Some, like the Boer commandos, were tough frontiersmen, but not trained for set-piece battles. Others were raw recruits with minimal training. Janssens knew he was outnumbered and outgunned, but by choosing favourable ground at Blaauwberg, he hoped to delay the British or at least negotiate better surrender terms. It was a desperate defence, built on hope, terrain and sheer determination, rather than superior firepower. Defending Cape Town itself was unrealistic. A British naval bombardment could easily destroy the city's weak defences. Instead, Janssens moved his forces north of the city, setting up a defensive line along a low ridge at Blaauwberg. This open, sloping ground blocked the main road to Cape Town and gave his troops a slight tactical advantage, his best chance to meet the British head-on. Janssen's plan was simple, but risky. Delay the British advance long enough to force negotiations, or at least show determined resistance. Victory was unlikely, but buying time was essential. On the morning of January 8th, 1806, his troops assembled along the ridge. The sun was already high, beating down on the dry, open terrain. In the distance, clouds of dust marked the approach of the British columns. The battle for the Cape was about to begin. General Baird advanced his forces in two long lines. At the centre stood the seasoned 24th, 59th and 83rd Regiments of Foot. Light infantry and cavalry supported the flanks, while artillery units positioned themselves behind, ready to unleash covering fire. Facing them, Janssens arrayed his smaller force along the ridge. His right flank was held by Boer militia and local volunteers. Batavian regulars and French Marines formed the centre, while lightly armed irregulars and Khoi auxiliaries guarded the left. Shortly after 8 a.m, British artillery opened fire. The infantry advanced steadily and with precision, well trained, well drilled and heavily supplied. The Batavian defenders returned fire unevenly. Some units held their ground, while others faltered under the relentless pressure. Within the first hour, Janssen's right flank began to break. Poorly equipped Boer militia fell back in disorder, exposing the centre. Batavian troops rushed to plug the gap, but the imbalance in numbers was telling. Outnumbered and exhausted, Janssens rode along his lines, urging his men to hold. Despite his resolve, British volleys tore through the Batavian ranks, thinning their defences with every passing minute. By late morning, with his troops retreating and no reserves left, Janssens ordered a fighting withdrawal inland towards the mountains, hoping to regroup beyond British reach. The battle had lasted just a few hours. Casualties were uneven, around 200 British soldiers killed or wounded, but Batavian losses were far greater, especially among central regiments and irregulars. Though brief, the Battle of Blaauwberg was decisive. The road to Cape Town was now wide open. With the Batavian forces retreating, Baird moved quickly. By January the 9th, British troops were at Cape Town's outskirts. The city's garrison, disorganised and demoralised, offered little resistance. On the 10th of January, British troops formally entered Cape Town. The occupation was orderly, no sacking, no reprisals. Local authorities were instructed to continue civil administration under British oversight, and daily life went on with minimal disruption. Janssens, meanwhile, had retreated to the mountains near the Hottentots Holland range, just east of Cape Town. Though diminished, he still commanded several hundred men and refused to surrender right away. For nearly a week, he sought better terms and looked for any chance to hold out. But without reinforcements and growing increasingly isolated, the end was inevitable. On January the 18th, near the village of Papendorp, what's now part of modern-day Woodstock, Janssens met with British officers to finalise the terms of surrender. The conditions were clear and surprisingly generous for the era. Batavian soldiers were allowed to return to Europe or stay as civilians. Private property was to be respected, and local laws and customs would be temporarily maintained. Janssens himself was granted safe passage back to the Netherlands. With this agreement, Batavian control of the Cape came to an end. 3 months after the British takeover, the 40-gun French frigate Canonnière narrowly escaped capture. Still believing the Cape was under Batavian control, her crew anchored near Simonstown. But when the captain went ashore in a rowboat, he was met with gunfire. He and his crew managed to retreat without casualties, and the Canonnière sailed back to the French colony at Reunion Island. Though British forces took control in early 1806, formal annexation of the Cape didn't happen right away. The ongoing Napoleonic Wars kept Europe and the Cape's fate in flux. It wasn't until the Treaty of Paris in 1814 that the Cape was officially ceded to Britain by the Netherlands, confirming what military action had already decided. From that point on, British rule became permanent. The Cape Colony was fully integrated into the British Empire, serving as a crucial naval and trading hub on the route to India and the East. This change had deep and lasting consequences. British administration introduced new laws, language and customs that would shape South Africa's future. While Dutch influence didn't vanish overnight, 1806 marked the beginning of a long era dominated by British policies and culture. But this story isn't just in books, it's still alive beneath our very feet. Beneath the rolling plains where the Battle of Blaauwberg once raged, archaeologists are uncovering a silent story. Led by Willem Hutten and supported by the city of Cape Town, a dedicated team of archaeologists is peeling back over 2 centuries of history. They've uncovered poignant relics, cannonballs scorched by fire, shards of shrapnel, tangible whispers from that fierce battle in 1806. These artifacts breathe life into dusty chronicles, connecting us to the thunder of muskets and artillery. It's a powerful reminder. The very soil of Blaauwberg still holds the memory of this pivotal moment in southern African history. The battle and capture of the Cape might seem like a small chapter in the vast saga of the Napoleonic Wars, but its impact was huge. It reshaped Southern Africa's political and cultural landscape for over a century. The Cape stayed under British control until it became part of the Union of South Africa in 1910. Blaauwberg may have been fought thousands of miles from Napoleon's battlefields, but its outcome weakened his proxies and secured Britain's grip on the route to India. At the Cape, French ambition was dealt a stinging blow, and in just a few hours of musket fire, the destiny of a continent changed. Southern Africa would never be the same again. Thanks for joining me on this journey back to 1806. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please like, subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you.